If you're watching this, I'm assuming that you are at least familiar with the idea of herd immunity, specifically as it relates to biological diseases, right? The idea is if enough individuals in a population become immune to a disease through vaccination or through getting the disease and recovering and developing natural immunity, then the disease can't spread throughout the rest of the population. So even people who don't have immunity, they are no longer at risk of even getting the disease. The purpose of this video is to inspire some non-naive optimism in you by appropriating this idea and using it to develop a conceptual framework to understand how we as individuals are capable of fighting back against ideological diseases or pathological meme complexes, or most simply bad ideas, by developing intellectual herd immunity. If enough individuals in their local networks can develop a functional understanding of psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, etc., they can prevent the spread of bad ideas and ideological disease by acting as localized curators of information. And I want to show you this TikTok to illustrate what I mean.
I've thought about this for a long time, and I think the age of information is over. I think we've entered the age of curation. The expression, knowledge is power, has fueled us for years, and it's true. But in a world with an abundance of data, the power begins to come from the ability to sort through knowledge and utilize it more effectively. People learn by copying others because there's always been too much information. A child 3,000 years ago looked up to parents and became like them in an attempt to survive the wilderness and avoid the inevitable death that would come from indecision at a key moment. The rise of online influencers isn't shallow or insignificant. It's another attempt of humanity at filtering data. Every person is a filtration system of information, and the ones who survive represent useful data. The people who curate knowledge by showing an aspect of their lives that they believe has value allows the free market of human choice to adapt and thrive.
Previously, we entrusted institutions to sift through all of the complex data out in the world and curate the most relevant pieces of information for everyday people. But since they've all become corrupt, that responsibility has been decentralized to individual journalists or intellectuals or online figures who use social media to curate information for their followings. And the past decade or so has been so crazy because we are in a chaotic transition into this new steady state of individual curation. Now, there are two key things to understand about this new steady state. Because of the more direct and intimate nature of social media, people can develop more personal understandings of information curators and get a better read on their strengths and blind spots. I used to not like the streamer Destiny because he was too far left, but over time his arc has shifted to be more of a enlightened centrist, which I like. And I used to take everything Jordan Peterson said as probably correct, and now his recent escapades have made me rethink that. But the point is, people can see these information curators evolve as real human beings over time. Whereas in a previous information landscape, newscasters would just be talking heads and neutral, objective personas who read off a script and don't develop at all over any period of time. And so the relationship people have with their information curators is a bit more human, and I think lends itself to more trust and sustainability over time. And then here's the other important thing, which is a bit more nuanced. People won't absorb information until it passes through filters that they personally trust. And this is why I don't believe you can have too many people talking about the same issue. For example, Wim Hof and his breathing and cold shower techniques have been around in popular media for years, but I brushed him off as irrelevant just because there's so much information out there, I had no reason to look into him. But then Jordan Peterson, who's someone whose opinion I generally trust, he interviewed him, and thus the Wim Hof breathing and cold shower techniques pass through an information filter that I trust, and as a result, I've been doing the cold showers and breathing techniques for a few years now. It's important to remember different information curators appeal to different personalities and tribes, right? So I might talk about the value of Jordan Peterson's ideas, but when someone like CJ the X talks about the same value of Peterson's ideas,
I, as a joke, called myself a light side Jordan Peterson.
He can filter and sanitize that information in some sense to a way that is much more appealing to a more progressive audience that would normally be very resistant to Peterson.
It is subjective what you make of Jordan's intentions and philosophies and the directions they're supposed to take you. However, his impact is meaningful to discuss in objective terms. Consensus defines effect. So with all these caveats out of the way, the point is I want to show a Jordan Peterson clip in a positive light.
Because music is the one thing that modern people can't be cynical about. Thank God for that. And I've been fascinated by music because of that. It speaks meaning to people, right? Even nihilistic punk rockers are so damn engaged with their music that they can hardly stand it. And you can knock on them and say, look, you know, you're having a transcendent religious experience, and they'll just tell you to f*** off, because that's You study literature and the humanities so that you can familiarize yourself with the wisdom of our civilization. Man, you should do that because people have been working on this thing for a long time, and it's rich beyond comparison, so why wouldn't you do that? And you teach yourself to read, and you teach yourself to speak, and you teach yourself to think, and you teach yourself to communicate. And I can tell you, if you can read and think and communicate, you are absolutely 100% unstoppable.
He's right. Like, yeah. Yes.
And so at a macro level, you have a hierarchy where people at the top are knowledgeable and have huge audiences. People with smaller and more interconnected audiences listen to those individuals. And then those people filter the information through to their local networks and so on and so forth until you get down to the actual individuals on the ground, the day-to-day people like you and I. And then we all act as local information curators and filters for friends, families, organizations, and whatnot, right? And this becomes the intellectual herd immunity. Because if you get really 2 or 3 people who are moderately respected in a group, an organization, or whatever, if they speak up and advocate for something, then that whole organization will generally follow suit. And the same thing can be said for friend groups or social groups or whatever. And so that's why it's important. Again, this is a small channel, and I try to communicate things authentically so people can evaluate my personality and determine whether or not I'm someone who's trustworthy and worth listening to. But each of us ultimately can play that responsibility in the lives of our friends. For example, I have some groups of friends where I'm really the only person who takes any interest, much to the annoyance of other people, into like politics and stuff that's kind of at a very nuanced, esoteric level for people who have too much time on their hands. And when push comes to shove and there's a serious political issue going on, I'll have friends and people reach out to me and say, hey, Paul, what do you think of this? And that's pretty cool. It just speaks to the fact that if you know what you're talking about and you're a trustworthy person, people will listen. And that's how we develop intellectual herd immunity, in my opinion. So, good luck and Godspeed.